Red Bull's biggest problem is no longer a slow car. It is whether Max Verstappen still trusts the team enough to stay. Laurent Mekies has admitted Verstappen was right to be furious after the same rear wing problem reportedly failed twice, in Austria and at Silverstone, both times as the car entered a high-speed corner. Verstappen said he was lucky twice because suddenly losing rear downforce at that speed can cause a serious injury. But the danger does not end there. Verstappen is 7th in the championship with 91 points. Red Bull is 207 points behind Mercedes, and reports suggest a performance clause could allow him to leave before his contract expires in 2028. So every technical failure now carries a terrifying second consequence. Red Bull is not only losing races, it may be pushing away the driver who has carried the entire team. And Mekies' latest admission suggests the situation behind the scenes could be far worse than Red Bull wants anyone to believe. Subscribe to the channel. To understand why this is such terrible news for Red Bull, you have to separate two problems that are now crashing into each other. The first problem is performance. The second is trust. And when a team loses both at the same time, even a long contract can stop feeling secure. Red Bull's season has already produced enough warning signs. A power unit failure ended Verstappen's Monaco Grand Prix. Then came Austria, where the rear wing reportedly failed to return to its normal position before a high-speed corner. Verstappen crashed. Red Bull accepted responsibility. Laurent Mekies apologized. That should have been the moment the danger ended. But it did not. At Silverstone, the same basic problem reportedly appeared again. The wing failed to close correctly as Verstappen approached Stowe, another extremely fast corner. The rear of the car suddenly lost downforce. Verstappen spun into the gravel. And this time, his frustration was impossible to hide. He explained that when the wing does not return properly, the car loses a huge amount of rear grip. At that speed, the driver is no longer dealing with an uncomfortable balance. He is dealing with a car that can suddenly become almost impossible to control. Verstappen said he had been lucky twice. That is the sentence Red Bull cannot escape. Lucky twice. Not frustrated twice. Not slowed twice. Lucky twice. Because, in Verstappen's own words, this kind of failure can seriously hurt a driver. And that changes the entire meaning of the problem. A slow car damages results. An unreliable car damages confidence. But a car that fails in a dangerous way damages trust. And trust is the foundation of everything a Formula One driver does. When Verstappen enters a high-speed corner, he commits before the car completes the turn. He trusts the aerodynamic surfaces. He trusts the brakes. He trusts the tires. He trusts the engineers who told him the machine is ready. He cannot enter every corner wondering whether the rear wing will close. He cannot wait for confirmation. By the time he knows something is wrong, the car may already be sliding. That is why Mekies' admission matters so much. He did not tell Verstappen to calm down. He did not dismiss the reaction. He said Verstappen was right not to be happy. He also described it as deeply unpleasant for a driver to be let down in high-speed corners at 2 consecutive rounds. That phrase reveals the real damage. Let down. Red Bull did not only suffer a technical failure, it failed the driver who depends on the team to protect him from preventable danger. And once that happens twice, every promise becomes harder to believe. Red Bull could say the issue was unusual. It could say the design had been studied. It could say the next version would be safer. But Verstappen had already experienced the consequences. Once in Austria, again at Silverstone. That is why Red Bull's next move was so revealing. The team abandoned the problematic wing concept before the Belgian Grand Prix. It returned to the older specification used before Miami. That was not a small adjustment. It was a complete reversal. The newer wing had been introduced to reduce drag on the straights. In simple terms, it was designed to help the car cut through the air more easily. Then, before the corner, it had to close again so the rear of the car regained downforce. The concept only worked if that movement happened perfectly. Every lap, and every corner, every time. But when the wing stayed open, the rear of the car lost the aerodynamic force that helped hold it to the track. Imagine running toward a sharp turn while someone suddenly removes the grip from your shoes. 1 second, you feel planted. The next, your feet disappear beneath you. Now imagine that happening at Formula One speed. That is why Verstappen's anger was not exaggerated. The car had failed at the exact moment he needed it most. And Red Bull's decision to remove the wing proved the team no longer trusted the design either. But here is where the story becomes even worse. The wing failure did not happen during a dominant Red Bull season. It happened while the team was already falling behind. After the Belgian Grand Prix, Verstappen reportedly sat 7th in the Drivers' Championship. He had 91 points. Championship leader Kimi Antonelli had 204. That is a gap of 113 points. And in the Constructors' Championship, Red Bull was reportedly 207 points behind Mercedes. Those numbers completely changed the pressure around Verstappen's future. Because when a team is winning, a driver may tolerate problems. A bad weekend can be absorbed. A technical mistake can be forgiven. A difficult car can still feel worth the risk if the championship remains within reach. But when the team is already far behind, every failure feels larger. The wing problem costs points. The power unit problem costs points. The handling issue costs points. And every lost point becomes another reason to question the future. That is why the reported contract clause matters. According to the source, paddock reporting suggests Verstappen may have a performance-based exit clause. His contract otherwise runs until 2028. But the clause could reportedly allow him to leave if he is not inside the top 2 in the driver's standings by the summer break. The source does not provide the full contract language. It does not confirm that Verstappen has activated anything. But it makes one point extremely clear. He is currently nowhere near the reported threshold. 7th is not close to 2nd. And that means Red Bull may no longer control Verstappen's future simply because a contract exists. Performance may control it. That is the real danger. Red Bull's problems are creating the exact conditions that could give Verstappen a way out. The team does not need to lose him through one dramatic argument. It can lose him slowly, one failure at a time, one broken promise at a time, one dangerous moment at a time. The contract may say 2028. But if the performance clause works as reported, the standings may matter more than the date. And that makes every race a negotiation. Not with words, with results. Every time Red Bull gives Verstappen a reliable car, it strengthens the case for staying. Every time the car fails, it weakens that case. Every time the team solves a problem, it rebuilds trust. Every time the same problem returns, it destroys more of it. That is why the second wing failure was so damaging. The first failure created concern. The second created a pattern. And patterns are much harder to dismiss. Verstappen now knows the team can identify a problem, apologize for it, and still allow something similar to happen again. That does not mean Red Bull ignored the danger. The source says the team later found a design flaw through testing and abandoned the concept. But for Verstappen, that discovery came after 2 incidents. After Austria, after Silverstone, after 2 moments when he said he was lucky not to be hurt. That timing matters. Because Formula 1 drivers live with risk every weekend. They accept high speed. They accept close racing. They accept the possibility of contact. But they expect the machinery to behave as designed. When it does not, especially in a repeatable way, the emotional reaction becomes much deeper than ordinary frustration. It becomes doubt. And doubt is dangerous inside a cockpit. The next time Verstappen approaches a similar corner, the memory remains. Even if the old wing is fitted, even if the team says the problem is gone, the body remembers what happened. The driver may still commit. He may still be fast. He may still push to the limit. But the relationship has changed. The car is no longer automatically trusted. It has to earn that trust back. And that is something Red Bull cannot repair with one podium. At Spa, Verstappen finished 3rd. That was a useful result. Red Bull scored points with both cars. The dangerous wing was removed. The immediate crisis appeared calmer. But 3rd place did not solve the larger problem. Verstappen still finished 11.586 seconds behind the winner. Red Bull remained far behind Mercedes in the championship. The handling issues were not erased. The Monaco power unit failure was not erased. And the questions around Verstappen's future did not disappear. That is the difference between stopping the bleeding and curing the problem. Red Bull stopped using the wing. That prevented another failure from the same design. But the team still had to prove it could build a car Verstappen wanted to drive for years. And Mekies' own comments reveal how difficult that task is. He said the team was performing every possible analysis at the factory. But he also explained that the solution could not simply remove the handling problems. It had to produce lap time. That is the trap. Making the car easier to drive may be possible. Making it easier to drive without making it slower is much harder. Think of a shopping trolley with a damaged wheel. You can stop the shaking by slowing down. But that does not fix the trolley. It only hides the problem. Red Bull cannot solve its balance issues by taking performance away. Verstappen does not need a calmer car that cannot compete. He needs stability and speed. He needs reliability and aggression. He needs a machine he can trust in a high-speed corner while still believing it can win. That is an incredibly difficult combination. And Red Bull has less time to find it than the contract date suggests. Because the season is moving. The championship gap is growing. Rival teams are watching. And every weekend increases the credibility of a possible exit. The source also mentions reported swap speculation involving Oscar Piastri. McLaren denied those talks. So there is no confirmed agreement there. But the existence of the rumor still reveals something important. The Formula One world is beginning to imagine Red Bull without Verstappen. That would have seemed almost impossible during the team's strongest period. Now it is part of the conversation. And once the paddock begins treating a move as possible, pressure spreads rapidly. Other teams begin considering the opportunity. Other drivers begin looking in the Red Bull seat. Managers begin protecting alternatives. Sponsors begin asking questions. Engineers begin wondering what the team will look like without its central figure. Even when nothing is signed, uncertainty starts changing behavior. That is why Red Bull is in much greater danger than the standings alone suggest. The team is not only losing points, it risks losing control of the story. And when a team loses control of the story around its most important driver, every technical issue becomes evidence for departure. A rear wing failure becomes evidence. A power unit retirement becomes evidence. A handling problem becomes evidence. A championship deficit becomes evidence. One issue may not be enough. Together, they can create a conclusion. The project is no longer moving quickly enough. That is the fear Red Bull must destroy. Not with reassurance. With performance. Because Verstappen already knows the team values him. He already knows Red Bull wants him to stay. The real question is whether staying still gives him the strongest future. That is much harder to answer. Loyalty can survive a difficult race. It can survive a difficult season. But loyalty becomes vulnerable when the driver begins to believe another team offers a better chance to win. And Verstappen does not need certainty elsewhere. He only needs the alternative to feel less risky than staying. That is where Mekies' position becomes incredibly difficult. He must protect the driver. He must fix the car. He must restore confidence. He must stop the championship gap from growing. And he must do all of it while Verstappen may already possess a route out. One mistake can be repaired. Two can be explained. But repeated failures begin changing the future. And the next part of this crisis reveals why Red Bull may be even more dependent on Verstappen than the results suggest. Because if he leaves, the team will not only lose its fastest driver, it may lose the one person who has been hiding just how serious Red Bull's decline has become.